What if I told you that just moments ago, your name was spoken in a place most people never reach? What if heaven paused, not to celebrate, but because of what was said about you? Stay with me, because once you hear this, you won't see your life the same way again. Only 5 minutes left, and no, this is not symbolic, this is not poetic, and this is not random. In the spiritual realm, timing is precise, sharp, intentional. And when a name is read from the book of records, it means something irreversible has just happened. A cycle didn't fade out, it was closed. A chapter didn't drift away, it was judged. Your name was not whispered in a corner, it was read aloud, clearly, deliberately, with attention, and the moment those words were spoken, there was a reaction that no one anticipated. Not on earth, not among people, not in circumstances, but in heaven itself. Something shifted, something paused. Something that was expected to follow one direction suddenly changed course, and the reason was tied directly to you. This message didn't randomly appear in your feed. It crossed time, resistance, and distraction because you were meant to hear it now, at this exact moment, before something else unfolds. And before I go any further, take a second and like this video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and comment 99, because spiritually, 9 represents completion, and 99 is the signal of a double closing, the end of one season and the sealing of another. By doing this, you're not just engaging, you're aligning yourself with what's already moving in your favor. Stay with me, because what was said about you next is what truly shocked heaven. The Book of Records is often misunderstood, and that misunderstanding alone has kept many people blind to what is actually unfolding in their lives right now. This book is not a list of crimes, not a catalog of failures, not a spiritual court transcript waiting to condemn you. It is something far more unsettling and far more powerful. It is a ledger of truth, not public truth, not the version people saw, but the truth beneath the surface, the hidden layers of your decisions, motives, endurance, and restraint. It records what never made it into conversations. The battles you fought silently. The discipline you practiced when no one was watching. The strength it took to stay calm when reacting would have felt justified. Every time you chose integrity over impulse, patience over explosion, faith over panic, something was written. Not dramatically, not loudly, quietly, precisely. This book does not respond to applause, it responds to alignment. It documents the moments you almost quit, but didn't. The nights you questioned everything but still woke up and moved forward. The seasons where nothing seemed to change, yet you kept showing up without evidence that it would ever pay off. While others were rewarded quickly and faded just as fast, your progress moved differently, slower on the surface, deeper underneath. The Book of Records tracks depth, not speed. It remembers delays that were misinterpreted as denial. It preserves the truth behind misunderstandings, especially the ones that damaged your reputation or isolated you. When people misjudged you, when intentions were twisted, when your silence was mistaken for weakness, those distortions did not overwrite the record. They only made it clearer. This is why nothing you endured vanished. Nothing dissolved into nothingness. Every restrained reaction, every mature decision made in emotional pressure, every time you chose to walk away instead of destroy, all of it accumulated weight. And when your name was read, it wasn't light. It wasn't casual. It carried substance because your journey was not casual. Your life has been observed in layers most people never experience. Watched in moments where you thought you were alone. Evaluated in seasons where you felt invisible. And here is the unsettling part most never consider. The Book of Records doesn't just store the past. It signals what someone is capable of handling next. And when your name appeared there, it triggered a recognition that something about you had matured enough to move forward. But what followed that recognition was not automatic approval. There was a pause, a hesitation, and a question that changed the tone of everything that came next. Heaven was not shocked because you suffered. Suffering is common. It happens everywhere, every day, to people who never change and to people who collapse under its weight. What caused the disturbance was something far rarer. Heaven expected a familiar outcome, a predictable conclusion based on the pressure you were under, the length of the delay, the number of disappointments stacked against you. The expectation was that time would wear you down, that isolation would harden you, that unanswered questions would slowly turn into resentment. That is what usually happens. That is what history suggests. But when your journey was reviewed, the pattern broke. The reaction shifted because what was seen did not match what was assumed. You were pressed from angles most people never experience. The pressure didn't come all at once. It came in waves, strategically spaced, just enough to keep you tired, just enough to make quitting feel reasonable. And yet something inside you refused to corrode. You felt anger, yes, but it didn't rot into bitterness. You experienced disappointment, but it didn't turn into cruelty. You were delayed, repeatedly, but delay did not disconnect you from purpose. That contradiction is what caught attention. You bent without snapping. You absorbed impact without becoming sharp. You lost things, people, time, and still didn't let loss rewrite your character. Heaven observed moments where you had every justification to give up, to retreat, to emotionally disengage from life, and instead, you adapted. Quietly, imperfectly, but sincerely. And that adaptation mattered more than visible success ever could. You learned restraint while being provoked. You learned patience while being ignored. You learned clarity while walking through confusion. Those are not survival skills most people develop. Those are governing traits. And here is where the shock deepened. You didn't just survive conditions designed to crush momentum. You retained empathy. You retained discernment. You retained the ability to care, even when being cared for felt distant or non-existent. That preservation is rare. Pain usually narrows people. It hardens them, makes them reactive, suspicious, volatile. But your pain did something else. It refined you. It stripped excess. It forced you to see reality without illusions, without entitlement, without fantasy. You didn't emerge louder, you emerged sharper. And that changed how your endurance was interpreted. You weren't just someone who survived something difficult. You became someone who could be trusted with influence without becoming corrupt, with authority without becoming cruel, with clarity without becoming arrogant. That is what altered the trajectory. That is why the reaction was not applause but silence. Because resilience at that level doesn't announce itself. It redefines expectations. And once that resilience was recognized, it raised a deeper question that had nothing to do with what you endured and everything to do with what you are now capable of handling. And that question is what pushed everything into unfamiliar territory. There are moments that don't announce themselves loudly, moments that don't arrive with visible signs or dramatic warnings, yet they quietly carry more weight than entire years combined. This is one of those moments. The reason this is happening now has nothing to do with chance and everything to do with timing that has been narrowing for a long time. The 5-minute window is not about urgency meant to scare you. It's about precision meant to awaken you. It represents a convergence, a rare alignment where accumulated choices finally meet consequence. For a long time, your life has felt like it was moving forward but not advancing, like effort was being made without proportionate results, like momentum existed internally but stalled externally. That was not stagnation, that was containment. The old timeline had not expired yet, and nothing meaningful can fully begin until what came before has officially ended. This window marks the moment when expiration occurs. When what once governed outcomes loses authority, when patterns that kept repeating no longer have jurisdiction. And here's the part most people miss. You didn't arrive at this moment because you figured something out intellectually. You were carried here through endurance, through restraint, through surviving without becoming reactive. While you were focused on getting through days, something else was quietly arranging the conditions for this transition. Doors you thought were permanently closed weren't locked, they were timed. Opportunities you thought passed you by weren't missed. They were withheld until alignment caught up with capacity. The 5 minutes symbolize a handoff, a transfer from one version of life to another, and transfers don't last long. They require awareness, because if you don't recognize the shift, you risk responding with old instincts to a new season. That's why this message matters now, not later. This is not inspiration meant to comfort you. This is confirmation meant to recalibrate you. The pressure you've been feeling recently, the subtle restlessness, the sense that something is about to change but hasn't yet revealed how, that's not anxiety. That's anticipation. It's the body responding before the mind catches up. You've been standing at the edge of something without realizing the ground beneath you was already moving. And what happens next doesn't depend on effort alone, it depends on recognition. On understanding that this moment is not repeating itself. That this window closes whether you act or not. And here's the unsettling truth. Once a new timeline begins, the old one cannot be re-entered. You don't go back to who you were. You don't respond the same way. You don't tolerate the same delays. The question isn't whether change is coming. It's whether you'll meet it consciously or let it rush past unnoticed. Because right now, in this narrow span, something is waiting for your awareness to catch up with what has already been decided. You were never treated like everyone else, and that truth may have confused you for years, because from the outside it looked unfair, unnecessary, even excessive. But the reason was never punishment, neglect, or distance. It was design. Some lives are cushioned early, insulated from friction so they can remain functional within narrow boundaries. Others are exposed to pressure repeatedly because they are meant to operate beyond those boundaries. You were in the second category, not because you were stronger at the beginning, but because you were meant to become stronger through the process. Pressure reveals architecture. It shows what collapses quickly and what holds under strain. And from early on, your life became a testing ground where layers were applied, removed, and applied again. The silence you experienced wasn't abandonment, it was conditioning. Silence teaches discernment. It forces you to listen beyond noise, to read situations without constant guidance, to develop internal stability rather than dependency. While others were given answers quickly, you were given space. And space, when endured, sharpens perception. The delays weren't obstacles thrown in your way randomly. They were calibrations, timing adjustments that aligned you with outcomes you couldn't have handled earlier without distortion. You were delayed not because you were behind, but because you were ahead of what your environment could support. So alignment had to catch up to capacity, and that process is uncomfortable. It isolates, it makes you question yourself. It creates seasons where effort seems invisible and consistency feels unrewarded. But during those seasons, something critical was happening beneath the surface. You were being trained to hold weight without collapsing inward. You were being trained to carry responsibility without becoming rigid. You were being trained to make decisions without constant validation, and here is the part few people understand. Tests aren't always dramatic. They don't always feel like challenges. Some tests feel like boredom. Others feel like waiting. Some feel like being overlooked while less capable people move ahead. Those are not accidents. Those moments expose entitlement, ego, impatience, and insecurity. And you passed more of those tests than you realize. You didn't lash out when overlooked. You didn't self-destruct when delayed. You didn't abandon your values when shortcuts appeared. Even when you felt tired, unseen, misunderstood, you continued to refine rather than unravel. Heaven doesn't entrust weighty assignments to untested hands because untested hands drop what they can't emotionally carry. You were tested because you were being evaluated for something that requires steadiness, discretion, and clarity under pressure. You were trained to remain grounded when outcomes fluctuate, to remain precise when emotions rise, to remain ethical when influence increases. These traits are not common, they are cultivated, and cultivation requires time, resistance, and repeated exposure to discomfort. That's why your life didn't follow the easier path. Ease wouldn't have developed what was needed. Comfort wouldn't have revealed what was required. And now, looking back, the pattern becomes visible. The intensity, the isolation, the timing. It wasn't random, it was preparation. And the most unsettling part is this. The phase of testing doesn't end quietly. It ends when responsibility is introduced. Which means what comes next will not feel like rest. It will feel like assignment. After your name was spoken, there was a pause. And that pause matters more than most people realize. It wasn't hesitation born from doubt. It was recalibration. A moment where what was expected no longer applied, and what was coming next required a different measure. Decisions at that level are never rushed. They are weighed, aligned, and then released with precision. And when the decision came, it wasn't subtle, it wasn't conditional, it wasn't delayed, it was not against you, it was for you. What was declared wasn't permission to try again or allowance to keep going. It was authority to move differently, authority to occupy space without shrinking, authority to influence without forcing, authority that doesn't need validation because it carries recognition built into it. This is where many misunderstand the shift. Authority doesn't arrive as applause, it arrives as response. Suddenly, things that once resisted you begin to soften. Not because effort increased, but because alignment did. Opportunities that once felt locked don't burst open dramatically, they become accessible. Conversations change tone. Doors don't swing wide immediately, but they unlock. People respond differently, not because you demanded more, but because something about your presence now carries weight it didn't before. Even resistance changes shape. What once blocked you outright now negotiates. What once drained you now reveals itself early. You begin to sense what aligns and what doesn't faster, cleaner, with less emotional labor. This is not coincidence, it's jurisdiction. When authority is released, you don't chase outcomes the same way. Outcomes start orienting toward you. That doesn't mean everything becomes easy. It means effort becomes effective. Energy stops leaking into the wrong places. You stop over-explaining. You stop forcing timing. You stop fighting battles that were never assigned to you. And here's the most important shift. You begin to recognize when something is beneath your capacity, not in arrogance, but in clarity. You no longer confuse tolerance with strength. You no longer confuse delay with destiny. You discern faster, move cleaner, and recover quicker. This is what happens when a season changes officially. The internal permission you've been waiting for finally matches the external conditions forming around you. And yet, authority always comes with responsibility. It requires restraint, precision, and awareness. Because now, your choices ripple further. Your reactions carry more consequence. Your alignment affects more than just you. That's why this declaration wasn't announced loudly. It was entrusted quietly. And if you're paying attention, you can already feel it. The subtle shift in how you're thinking. The way certain things no longer fit. The way your tolerance for misalignment has decreased. That's not impatience. That's readiness. Something has moved in your favor, yes, but what comes next will require you to move with it consciously. Because the declaration wasn't the end of the process. It was the signal that the next phase has already begun. And what that phase demands from you is about to be revealed. You didn't hear this by accident, and you didn't make it this far by chance. Something guided you here because your life is not random, your endurance was not wasted, and your silence was never invisible. Your name was read because your story carries weight beyond what people could see, because your consistency spoke louder than explanations, because heaven noticed what earth ignored, dismissed, or misunderstood. This moment is not asking you to remember who you were, it is inviting you to step fully into who you have become. The next chapter doesn't pause to check your confidence or wait for your permission. It declares that you are ready, not because you feel fearless, but because you are aligned. Walk forward with clarity, not confusion. Walk forward with confidence, not noise. Walk forward knowing that what once slowed you down was shaping your discernment, sharpening your judgment, strengthening your capacity to carry what is now approaching you. Nothing was late. Nothing was lost. Nothing needs to be reclaimed from the past. Everything converges here. This is not the end of your story. This is the point where fragments finally connect, where pressure turns into purpose, where endurance turns into authority. And before you leave this moment, anchor it. Comment, "I am ready," to seal this decision, to declare alignment, and to affirm that you are stepping forward consciously, not drifting. Let these words mark you. Let this moment steady you. Stand tall, breathe deep, move forward, because now, heaven is watching what you do next.